of person that tends to be very dramatic about fictional characters. There are many that I love, and some that I utterly despise. However, there are very few characters that genuinely manage to make my skin crawl. Some examples include Judge Claude Frollo from Hunchback of Notre Dame, or Calypso and Antinous in Epic the Musical. There's also Abijah Fowler in Blue Eye Samurai, Jack Randall in Outlander, Mrs. Grundy from Riverdale, Hal from Megamind, and Valentino in Hazbin Hotel. You'll notice a pattern to the characters on this list. All of them display predatory behavior, either romantic or sexual, to varying degrees. However, there's one character that I failed to mention, as he's the newest addition to this list, and that's Inosuke Shindo, aka Adam from Skate the Infinity. Skate the Infinity is a show about a group of skateboarders in Okinawa competing in an illegal underground skateboarding tournament called S. I was surprised, though, on my first watch through to find not only a show filled with tense skateboarding battles and wacky hijinks, but also a surprising amount of heart and serious care shown to its characters and relationships. While the show mainly focuses on teenagers Reki Kayan and Langa Hasagawa, it's the show's antagonist that really is the driving force behind the plot. Now, I can already hear all of the Adam apologists typing their hate comments like they do in every single piece of Adam critical content on the internet, but despite what you might think, I don't really hate Adam. Let me rephrase that. I hate Adam as a person, but I'm genuinely intrigued by him as a character. I think his depth is compelling, and I can definitely see why certain people might sympathize with him. I definitely do whenever it's scenes of him as a kid. It's just his adult self that... You know, he's definitely a fun character when he's not being a creep, and he has some of the most iconic lines in the entire show.
Hey, bitches and bros and non-binary hoes!
So, yeah, I can see the appeal of Adam. I just can't get over the whole weird obsession with teenage boys thing. So let's talk about it! My name is AJ, and welcome to my channel AJ Rambles, where I like to dive deep into topics that I care way too much about. Today I want to talk about who Inosuke is, his Adam persona, and his relationships with other characters throughout Skate the Infinity. So sit back, relax, and enjoy my rambling. Part 1. The Life of Inosuke Shindo. In case you're one of those people who just clicks on random video essays without watching the show, which, don't worry, I've definitely been there, or you're someone who just hasn't seen Skate in a while and you need a bit of a refresher, I'm going to summarize Inosuke's life a bit here. Inosuke was born in Okinawa, Japan to the Shindo family. His father, Eiichiro, was a politician, and Inosuke was expected from a young age to one day be a successor. We don't know much about his mom, though it's implied she either passed away or left when he was quite young. The earliest flashbacks we get are from when he's about 5 or 6 years old, and there's no trace of her anywhere by that point. Without a mother, Inosuke was raised quite heavily by Eiichiro's 3 sisters, mostly because his father was too busy with a political career to really care for a child. His aunts put a lot of emphasis on molding him to the perfect future politician, often through physical abuse. In a very twisted move, his aunts would tell him they were punishing him out of love since it would make him a better person. Surely, this will have no consequences later in life. Around this time, Inosuke befriends Tadashi Kikuchi, the son of the family's gardener. Tadashi teaches him to skateboard, which is done completely in secret since their friendship would be frowned upon due to their class difference. It appears Tadashi was his first friend, which is really something Inosuke needed at the time. There isn't a lot of information about what Inosuke was up to for the rest of his childhood, but we do know sometime around his mid-teens, he started skateboarding around the island under the alias Adam. More on that in a moment. It's then that Inosuke met and befriended Karu Sakurayashiki and Kojiro Nanjo, 2 teenage boys around his age that, at the time, were fairly new to skateboarding. Based on the OVA, I'm going to assume this was around their 2nd or 3rd year of high school. In Japan, you tend to stick with the same class for all 3 years, and every single one of Karu and Kojiro's peers seemed completely used to their antics by that point. This would place them around 16 or 17 when they met. Inosuke's friendship with the two quickly bloomed, and soon they became an inseparable trio of delinquents, causing havoc wherever they went. They got so close that he would even lower his hood around them, uncovering his face and effectively allowing them to see part of his true identity. But like all good things, this couldn't last forever. Eiichiro eventually discovered what he was up to and burned Inosuke's skateboard in front of him and Tadashi. It's worth mentioning that Tadashi's 2 years older than Inosuke, making him around 19 at this point and already working for the Shindo family. Because of this, his attempt to stand up for Inosuke is quickly shut down. Despite having his board burned, Inosuke pretty much immediately returns to skating, though not in the way he was before. He starts skating more recklessly and violently in increasingly more dangerous places, which would later become the early roots of S. It's around this time too that Inosuke starts becoming obsessed with the idea of finding his true Eve. He sees Eve as being someone who matches his skateboarding abilities that he could form normal life with. There's definitely some romantic undertones to this Eve fantasy, which contributes to the more problematic elements you'll see later. In a quest to find this true Eve, he'd draw prospective Eves into, quote, the zone, or stage of complete focus that drowns out the rest of the world. On the surface, this sounds like it would lead to an increase in performance, but in practice, this often meant that Inosuke's skating partners would lose sight of their surroundings. This led to many incidents in which Eve potentials wound up severely injured, sometimes permanently disabled. And Inosuke really doesn't seem too bothered by this fact, more so just disappointed that he can't find a compelling match. This dangerous behavior and disregard for others eventually is noticed by Kaoru and Kojiro, yet by the time they finally go to confront him, he has plans to leave for America the next day. More than likely, this was something his father planned for him, though we don't know for sure. An indeterminate amount of time passes before Inosuke returns to Okinawa. Upon his return, he properly starts S with the help of Tadashi, officially creating Okinawa's underground skateboarding scene. He goes so far as to hire security and pay off police to keep Crazy Rock off their patrol routes. His father passes shortly after this, leaving Inosuke open to seize his position. He becomes a lower house diet member within the government, a position which he must be at least 25 years old to fill. Even as an adult, his aunts still heavily control his life, to the point that even the pajamas he wears to bed are chosen by them. They put a lot of pressure on him and try to direct his political career while also urging him to find a bride to continue the Shindo family name. Skateboarding is his only outlet, and the only way he really has to truly express himself. Part 2.
The Matador of Love.
Adam is Inosuke's alter ego. Or is he? On a surface level, Adam does seem like a big caricature. He's loud, flamboyant, and just overall extra.
Adam's here! Get off! That's how it's done!
But the thing is, this isn't some character that Inosuke is playing. This is Inosuke. Sure, Adam is a little exaggerated, as he often plays up parts of his personality to make a good show for the crowd at S, but in general, this is the more genuine of Inosuke's two personas. In a really great video essay by Josie Cafe dissecting the queer subtext of Skate the Infinity, they compare Adam's dual personality to someone being in the closet, as a massive component of his Adam persona is his explicit attraction to men. Think about it. Inosuke doesn't have the freedom in his real life to express any sort of queer identity. While studies show Japan is progressing towards a more favorable view of homosexuality, a lot of older generations still cling to quite conservative values. Additionally, same-sex marriage is not legal, and protections against discrimination for members of the LGBTQ+ community are limited to the local level, with no national law in place penalizing discrimination. As someone in public office, Inosuke would have a much more difficult time holding his position if his sexuality were widely known. Therefore, it makes sense he would develop an alter ego that allows him the freedom to reflect his true feelings in a way he can't in his day-to-day life. In both his real life and at S, Inosuke displays behaviors that are both ruthless and underhanded. As a politician, Inosuke partakes in shady and corrupt dealings, and is even put under investigation after one of his party members is suspected of breaking the law. As Adam, he's even more violent than he was as a teenager, and a lot of his moves rely on contact that is honestly just straight up sexual harassment. The violence he displays as Adam appears to be his way of releasing frustrations he has from his extremely oppressive life. After his aunts urge him to protect Representative Takano through his illegal dealings, Inosuke's immediate response is to head to Crazy Rock and abandon responsibilities, even when Tadashi questions if it's an appropriate time to do so. This also seems to be why he throws himself so heavily into the wedding tournament he starts. Not only is he hoping to prove Longa is his quote true Eve once and for all, but it's also being held through a quite turbulent time in his life. We know Adam's participation throughout the course of the show is the most active he's been in a long time. The tournament has him frequently showing up and allowing him to more freely display his Adam persona. At this time, Takano has been arrested. He himself is under investigation. His party is turning to him to figure out how to deal with the mess of the current scandal, and his aunts are simultaneously freaking out over how everything will reflect on the family and urging him to marry a woman. You also have Tadashi entering the tournament under the alias Snake, which in Inosuke's mind is now mixing his two worlds together, given Tadashi is the only person to know of his double life. This creates the perfect storm for Inosuke to go full Adam. It's during the tournament that he unveils the full swing kiss, a move that must be relatively new since Cherry was not anticipating it. He also becomes even more sadistic, if that's somehow possible, as shown in his second race with Reki. Which leads me to my main point of this video. Part 3. How Inosuke connects with others. I absolutely love the OVA. From small things like the Runga piggyback under a rainbow that sent the fandom into cardiac arrest, to bigger pieces of lore such as when Joe and Cherry first started skating, it provided fans with enough new content to tide us over until season 2. The most interesting to me, however, was insight into how Inosuke views the other members of Skate's main cast. This is going to sound odd, so bear with me, but the idea of holding a dog show like S Tournament is brought up, and Inosuke immediately imagines everyone as different dogs. I knew there was some symbolism to this when Karu was imagined as two different dogs, but I don't know enough about dog breeds to really understand what was being said. Thankfully, Tumblr user Shitposting Cats shared an analysis on the subject, which served as the inspiration for this video. I will be referencing their analysis as I talk about each character, as well as various posts from other people that I'll give credit to as I go along. I'd also like to thank Tumblr user Kudo Usagi for translating any articles or interviews that I reference throughout the rest of the segment. We're gonna start with manga, mostly because I really just want to get this part out of the way. I had a visceral reaction to Adam's grand entrance at the end of episode 3, mostly because of the way he just immediately starts being weird the moment Longa's physically next to him. I could kinda sense he was going to be a more problematic character before this. Stuff like how he reacted to watching Longa's first race on the TV and his interactions with Mia earlier in the episode told me there was something off about him. But I wasn't expecting him to be this perverted right off the bat.
Oh, may I touch you?
Yeah, this guy's an absolute freak. Inosuke very quickly develops an obsession with Longa. Initially, he's just another Eve prospect, but during the first race, Longa manages to dodge his love hug move by jumping over him. This cements the idea in Adam's head that Longa is the Eve he's been searching for all this time.
I found you. You are the one. Finally, my own. True Eve.
He exhibits several concerning behaviors when it comes to Longa. For one, he makes big romantic gestures to him, such as giving him a massive bouquet of roses. There are also several instances of him touching Longa without his consent, often in very inappropriate ways, like pressing up against him mid-race. Though this isn't something that's exclusive to Longa, as he does similar things to Reki during both of their beefs. Another behavior that's severely disconcerting is the amount of time he spends watching videos of Longa. Included in the 4th volume of Skate the Infinity's Blu-ray and DVD is a booklet containing information about the characters, including their daily schedules on days they don't have S. Adam spends 11 p.m. to midnight every single day watching videos from S and clips of Longa, with it being noted that his Longa check is especially important. In the OVA, we see him spend a little over an hour in his study watching footage of Longa while drinking tea. And this isn't just limited to footage collected at S, as in episode 10, we outright see him spying on Longa with a drone and growing jealous of his relationship with Reki. In an issue of Animedia, creator Hiroko Otoshimi mentions how Adam keeps his phone on him at all times so he can check on Longa. So not only is he obsessed with him, but he seems to actively stalk him in his personal life. It's also worth noting that Inosuke really doesn't know Longa all that well. When he imagines him as a dog, he very superficially pictures him as a husky. Huskies are extremely athletic snow dogs, which is pretty in line with what Adam actually knows about him. In his mind, Longa is an idealized vision of an athlete, and his choice of a snow dog is specifically based on the knowledge that he's a snowboarder from Canada. Like I said, extremely superficial and surface level, which is kind of the whole point. In a Tumblr post by Bayani, they really sum up what Eve actually is to Adam. He touts Eve as someone that is his equal in skating, but his attitude on the matter suggests otherwise. Biblically, Eve was made from Adam's rib specifically for him, made to be his wife and submit to his will. Inosuke doesn't want someone as his equal, he wants someone that he can groom to be the perfect partner for him, completely dependent on him and him alone. Viewing Longa as anything other than a skateboarder with surface level traits would break this illusion for him. He can't view Longa as the full person that he is, because doing so would mean there's less room for Adam to mold him to fit this fantasy. This would also require him to acknowledge Longa's wants and needs as an individual, separate from his influence, which decenters his role in the future he imagines for them.
A world that belongs only to us. Look around, no one else here. Isn't it wonderful? Destiny sent you to me. Forget your boring life. We're meant to live like kings.
Why would I forget?
I'll remind you that this man is 26 years old while Longa is 17. A common argument I see Adam apologists and Eden shippers make is that this is all perfectly fine because the age of consent in Japan is 16. However, legality does not make something okay, and as many child development experts will tell you, an age gap like this in adolescence is wildly inappropriate due to differences in experience and cognitive development. There's a high risk of a teenager like Longa being coerced or manipulated by someone almost a decade older than him. Inosuke doesn't groom Longa in the traditional way like he does with Mia, but the way he does go about it produces a lot of the same effects on Longa's life. While skateboarding helped Longa find joy again after his father's passing, Inosuke briefly drawing him into the zone and tempting him with the possibility of something new causes him to skate less for fun and more for the thrill that it can offer. This leads to Longa becoming reckless, often disregarding his own safety just so he can see what other new things he can accomplish. He also breaks his promise to Reki that he won't continue trying to skate with Adam, alienating him from people he cares about. It's not until they're skating in their final beef and Longa is fully in the zone that he realizes this isn't what he wants. While searching for a good definition of the zone to use for this video, I stumbled across a post by Tumblr user Brazaki talking about the significance of the zone to Longa's character arc. To Longa, the zone is an embodiment of the complete emptiness and hollowness he felt following his father's passing, and, going further, is a representation of Inosuke's self-destructive and borderline suicidal tendencies. Both of these characters have had major life events or circumstances that have pushed them into depression, but Longa was able to find things to make life worth living again, while Inosuke spiraled further and further, allowing himself to grow into a cold and violent person with unreasonable and idealized expectations. Longa would not have been able to snap out of the zone had he not made up with Reki a few episodes prior. This likely would have led to him getting seriously injured or potentially even killed.
That's right. Skating is fun.
Which brings me to the next point I want to talk about, which is Inosuke's hatred of Reki. Throughout the show, Reki is a thorn in Inosuke's side. He doesn't really view him as the most capable skater, hence his complete absence from Inosuke's dog show vision, but he repeatedly gets in Adam's way and becomes the first person to truly humiliate him at S. At the end of episode 3, Reki stands up to him and challenges him to a beef for insulting Mia. Before this, like most people at S, Reki looked up to Longa and was intrigued by the myth and mystery he was shrouded in. However, after seeing his true colors and, more importantly, skating against him for the first time, he grows a strong disdain for the man instead. Skating against Adam for the first time is a terrifying and borderline traumatic experience for Reki. He wasn't expecting just how insane and brutal the man could actually be, and even ends up with minor injuries that he has to go to the emergency room for after being caught up in a love hug. Even further, there's also a level of guilt involved too, as by losing he forces Longa to be his next opponent. This first beef is the start of the wedge that slowly makes its way in Longa and Reki's relationship. Reki attempts to get Longa to back down from the race, which fails, and after it's ended by the police showing up, he makes Longa promise he won't try skating against Adam again. As stated earlier though, this is a promise Longa ultimately ends up breaking by entering the wedding tournament. A big part of the reason Reki even makes him promise this in the first place is because he previously had a friend who was permanently injured while skateboarding. He is terrified of the same thing happening to Longa. Their fight in episode 7 really shows how much this betrayal of trust actually hits him. Though it's worth mentioning that his feelings are compounded by insecurities that have been slowly building the more Longa's skill surpasses him. There's one component to Reki and Longa's relationship that I haven't mentioned yet that's a big part of the reason why Inosuke is so bothered by him. During their falling out, Longa goes to his mom for advice about how to make amends, and during this conversation, it's hinted at that Longa's feelings for Reki are a little bit more than platonic. Some people argue that this moment isn't enough to canonically say that Longa has a crush on Reki, but I'm vindicated by the wiki, and I can almost guarantee that if Reki was a girl, there would be significantly less debate on the subject. But I'm going to roll the clip and let you decide.
You like this person, right?
Yeah.
That's your truth. Those are the emotions you should share.
No way. That's embarrassing.
I'm just going to add that in the original Japanese version, Nanako asked this question in an explicitly romantic context, so just food for thought. While there's not as much concrete evidence to say Reki returns these feelings, that part doesn't matter as much in this context. What matters is that Inosuke watches them make up in episode 10 while stalking Longa with a drone, and identifies Reki as a threat to their hypothetical relationship. He gets Reki to take Shadow's place in the tournament after Shadow was injured and unable to compete, even referring to Reki as a third wheel when he makes this invitation. Shadow was slated to be Inosuke's opponent in the semifinals, and by racing against Reki, he's likely trying to make him look like the weaker of the two options, therefore projecting his own views of love onto Longa in the process. Technically, Reki does lose to Adam in this race, but that's not the whole story. Reki is much more prepared this time, and while he may not be in the same technical level as the rest of the cast, he is very skilled and knowledgeable when it comes to skateboarding as a whole.
You probably wobble the most when you take corners.
Yeah, I do. How can you tell?
Because skating. It's what I know best.
This kid literally makes skateboards, and I don't just mean he paints them or customizes them cosmetically, but he fully makes a board to suit a person's strengths and needs. For example, the entirety of Longa's board, including the deck itself, was made by him. He shaped it to something more suited to Longa's techniques as a snowboarder, and even added rotating trucks so it could spin in all directions, mimicking the way he'd move down snowdrifts.
You're riding the Reki Royal Straight Prince Maru, my dude.
What Reki may lack in technical ability, he more than makes up for in cleverness and ingenuity. In his second race against Adam, he fully accounts for the rain in the forecast that night. He uses special wheels that, while at first slowing him down, ultimately give him an advantage once the path gets slippery. Inosuke's lack of preparation for the rain and him underestimating Reki's abilities leads to him slipping in the mud, humiliating him in front of everyone who looks up to him. Truly the only reason that Reki loses this race is because his wheels break, and even then, it's only by a hair. Despite losing, everyone is cheering for Reki instead of Adam, and not only that, but Longa immediately rushes to his friend's side to make sure he's okay.
You did great, Red!
I'm the winner of this race. It was me.
Adam's plan fails, and he's so irate about this that he goes to physically retaliate against the teenager until Joe gets in his way and holds him back. This experience is a contradiction to Inosuke's worldview, where being the best is the only way to get you praise, recognition, and love.
I remember something Joe told me. Make sure you never end up alone.
Do you honestly believe that a nobody like you has the ability to successfully defeat a champion like me?
Moving on from Reki, I want to talk about Inosuke's relationship with Mia. I fully believe that before Longa, Mia was Inosuke's next choice as Eve. This isn't something that's outright stated in the show, but there's plenty of evidence to support this being the case. Inosuke basically follows Groomer 101 when it comes to Mia. The first time they meet, he's at a school to contribute funding for the skateboarding team. He immediately zeroes in on Mia and gives him a little advice that ends up helping him in the long run. The relationship progresses from there, with Inosuke periodically showing up and giving him more advice and checking on his progress. Over time, this leads to Mia giving his opinions a lot of weight, and he starts to become dependent on him for praise and validation.
Chinen, nice job on that close call.
Thank you.
I'll be there next time, so work hard.
As if anything less would be an option.
Inosuke doesn't need to do much work in the way of isolating him, as Mia is already lonely due to all of his friends abandoning him out of jealousy. A talented kid with no friends and a complex that says he needs to always be the best in order to be worthy. A perfect victim for someone with ill intentions. There is one element of the relationship that I don't see included a lot in discussions online. While Inosuke doesn't need to put in any work isolating him from his friends, Mia is still a 13-year-old with parents in charge of his life. So what can Inosuke possibly do that would prevent Mia from running to his parents should anything happen? Maybe, perhaps, getting him involved in an illegal underground skateboarding tournament. I don't think this is something Inosuke necessarily planned when getting him involved, but it still has a lot of the same effects. As is dangerous, and involves them trespassing at Crazy Rock, which is technically closed to the public due to safety concerns. Should something happen and Mia were to go to his parents, he'd be taking several personal risks. For one, they could punish him for sneaking out on a regular basis to participate. Not to mention, telling them that the well-known politician that sponsors the skateboarding team got him involved in illegal skateboard racing is something they may not even believe. And if they did and wanted to go to the police for any misconduct on Inosuke's end, Mia would have to admit to being an S in the first place, something illegal that could go on his record. This could impact him at school, particularly his participation in skateboarding, which would jeopardize his potential to be on the Japanese national team. This is also negating the risk of injury while attempting to see if Mia is his true Eve in the first place, which, as we've already talked about, has happened several times in the past. Now we know Inosuke doesn't pursue Mia right away, mostly because of his age. Proof of this is found in the line that makes me want to throw up the most in the entire show.
You're still a bud who hasn't blossomed yet. But when you do, that's when I will fall for you.
This mentality of waiting for someone to blossom, or more accurately, reach a certain age, is something we see plenty of in the real world. Most famously in countdowns to celebrities such as Lindsay Lohan, Britney Spears, the Olsen twins, Emma Watson, or Billie Eilish turning 18. The truth about these countdowns is these people aren't waiting for the appropriate time to find them attractive. They already do. They're just waiting for it to be socially acceptable to say out loud. This is the case with Mia and Skate. Inosuke was already planning on making him his next Eve. He was just waiting to seriously pursue it until Mia was old enough to do so. However, Inosuke is not shown to be a particularly patient person, so it's likely one of two things would have happened. Either he would have abandoned this notion of waiting and just started pursuing him anyways, or more likely, he would have abandoned Mia in favor of a more immediate and interesting prospect. Oh wait, that's exactly what happens. Langa intrigues him almost immediately, and in a rather messed up move, Inosuke gets Mia to challenge him to a race to draw him back to S after he's absent for a time. Mia finds the request odd, but does it anyways, which kinda shows just how deep Inosuke already had his claws in him.
This is seriously a waste of energy. I don't understand why Adam wanted me to do this crap.
As soon as the race is over and Langa comes out victorious, Adam literally insults Mia in a way he knows cuts deep.
You seem to be running on empty again, Mia. Friend skating is wonderful. At this point in your life, you have nothing left.
Oh my god, my Shayla!
Right after this, he openly expresses interest in Langa. This shows Mia that he was always disposable, and given how much weight he gave to Adam's validation, losing it hits hard. Thankfully, he now has friends to support him, in particular Reki, who stands up to him and attempts to win him an apology.
Hold on a second. Take back what you said about Mia.
When envisioning him as a dog, which Adam's segment of the OVA seems to be after the events of the show, he sees Mia as a Pomeranian. Small, yappy, a bit annoying, and practically a purse dog. They're also generally considered to be quite cute, which goes hand in hand with the whole tiny thing. He does seem to acknowledge his skill by showing him on an agility course, which would reflect Mia's style of skating, yet still not enough to be a genuine threat. This would make sense as Adam finishes ahead of Mia in the qualifying round, and Mia ends up losing to Tadashi in the first round of the tournament. Another thing is that Pomeranians are considered to be very loyal dogs, which is something that Mia is shown to be, and Inosuke would be aware of this given the nature of their previous relationship. This is something he even takes advantage of. Once Mia has a connection with someone, he tends to grow very attached to them, even if he makes it a point to relentlessly tease them. This also means when he's betrayed, it takes a toll on him, which can be seen with his former friends abandoning him, Adam discarding him for Langa, and during Reki's downward spiral in episode 10.
I'll forgive you for being a jerk if you come with me. Get up. Let's go.
Sorry. I can't. I'm overhead.
Wait! You lied to me, you traitor!
This next character isn't one that Inosuke has a particularly strong relationship with, but it's still one that I want to touch on, mostly because of the comparisons we can draw between the two of them, and that's Hirami Higa, aka Shadow.
The clown of the S community wins!
One of the biggest similarities between Inosuke and Hirami is that both of them have two personas with very distinct personalities. While characters like Kojiro and Karu also have two personas, they're not nearly as drastic as they are with these two. Adam and Shadow are also both shown to be more physically violent than their real-life counterparts. However, this is also where a lot of their differences lie. Hirami in his personal life is genuinely sweet to other people. Yeah, he gets annoyed with the teenagers when they show up in metal, but I feel like that's really valid given how much they really intrude on his life. Despite this annoyance though, he genuinely grows to care for them, frequently looking out for them and acting like an older brother of sorts in the way he teases them while helping them out.
Thanks for the ride, Pops.
Okay, out of the car.
Just kidding.
Inosuke, on the other hand, is nice to be charming. He has an agenda, and he's not going to go out of his way to do something for someone unless there's something in it for him. Another difference is the limits to the violence they're willing to enact on another person. Mia makes the comparison to how both of them like crushing their opponents, but Hirami is quick to say they're nothing alike, as while Shadow is willing to cause more minor injuries like scrapes and sprains, Adam is willing to go so far as to break bones and put someone in the hospital. Shadow's violence is also rooted in his strategy to win, and is on par with many other skaters' methods throughout S. On the other hand, Adam gets pleasure out of hurting other people. He likes to see the fear in their eyes and has no regard for the aftermath of the harm he causes. Despite being the overall more violent of the two, Inosuke views Shadow as a brute who forces his way through competition. This is reflected in his vision of Shadow as a bulldog. I'd also like to point out that Shadow's dog is the only one in clothing, which to me says that Inosuke is aware that this Shadow persona is just for show, or more accurately, a costume.
Only the weak-knees derailed by booze. Now the mask is in control.
I'm going to be talking about these next two characters together, mostly because I found it really hard to cleanly separate them into two distinct segments. I'm of course talking about Karu and Kojiro, or Cherry Blossom and Joe, as they're known respectively throughout the S community. I will be focusing more on Karu first, and then diving deeper into the other, but there's still a lot of overlap between the two of them. Kaoru and Kojiro have been friends for at least 20 years by the time the show starts, and became friends with Inosuke at the same time in their teen years. The relationship between these three is deeply entangled, which adds a lot of complexity to their individual dynamics. We see some of their history play out in flashbacks, primarily from Kaoru's perspective. It's clear from these flashbacks that Kaoru's feelings for Inosuke were not quite platonic.
We're friends, aren't we? I trust you guys.
The show is a master in show don't tell, and you'd honestly have to do a lot more mental gymnastics to ignore the undertones present in these scenes. I'm pretty sure Inosuke was at the very least aware of these feelings, though it's hinted at that he reciprocated them to some degree. However, it's unlikely any relationship between the two would have occurred, as doing so would have meant Inosuke would have had to be vulnerable and allow Kaoru into his life beyond just his Adam persona. After the incident with Inosuke's father, however, both Kaoru and Kojiro watched his downward spiral into violence and recklessness. Their friend changed completely in front of their eyes in just a few months, and by the time they went to confront him, it was too late, as he was leaving the next day. His intense entrance and departure from their lives deeply affected both of them, but Kaoru in particular seems to have changed a lot in response.
Don't even start that, Adam. You're the one who ditched us first.
Is that what happened?
In the OVA and flashbacks to their teen years in the main series, Kaoru is seen frequently laughing and smiling. However, in the present timeline, it's not until episode 11, 6 months after Kaoru's introduction, that we truly see him happy. And we can infer that this is something quite rare, as Kojiro looks surprised to see him laughing. Both Kaoru and Kojiro seem to have very different attitudes about Adam in their adult lives. In an interview with screenwriter Ichiro Okuchi, he explains that while Kojiro has accepted that Adam is too far gone, Kaoru holds on to hope that Adam might still change. This may seem out of character on the surface, as Kojiro appears to be the more optimistic of the two. However, despite his prickly and calculated exterior, Kaoru is quite sensitive. In an issue of Animedia, Kaoru is described as nervous and easily upset, the latter of which we see happen numerous times in the show.
Would you like to know what we'll be betting on?
That's a silly question. No.
It's during Cherry and Adam's beef that we see a lot of the previously mentioned flashbacks. This clearly demonstrates the hope that he was still holding on to, which makes it all the more shocking when mid-race, Adam unveils a new move he dubs the Full Swing Kiss, which is literally just him smacking Cherry in the face with a skateboard. This is the moment that Kaoru realizes Adam truly won't change, and we see him falling through a shattered image of their teenage selves before he hits the ground. And as if this weren't enough, Adam then turns around and starts taunting him before he passes out.
As always, your skating has no surprises. It's overcalculated so it can never transcend. Let me teach you something. The reason I never responded to your challenges was because I simply find you boring.
Just to rub even more salt in the wound. I think the show dogs Inosuke imagines for Kaoru are probably the most interesting of the bunch. Kaoru gets 2 dog breeds instead of 1, showing that Inosuke is fully aware of the 2 different personas Cherry keeps up, and that it's very important to him that they remain separate.
Come on, let's bet on it, Kaoru. Don't ever use that name again. Idiot! Cherry Blossom only exists on that mountain.
The 2 dog breeds he chooses for him are an Afghan Hound and a Poodle. I did a bit of research on my own because I wanted to try to figure out which dog represented which side. I believe the Poodle is meant to represent Kaoru himself, as Poodles are featured in the non-sporting category despite their history as gun dogs. This is mostly because they're now more associated with their intelligence and their prissy image. Meanwhile, Afghan Hounds are in the Hound category, as they're hunting dogs with keen eyesight and a powerful build, in this case meant to represent Cherry Blossom. However, despite both breeds having impressive capabilities, they're more commonly associated with their looks. They're the type of dog to get styled and prettied up, or as Shitposting Cats puts it, speaks to Inosuke's view of Kaoru as a bimbo. Bimbos are traditionally used to describe women, but Kaoru is also an especially feminine man.
Push me.
Yes, princess.
So, take that what you will. The reason this is so interesting to me is how it ties back to the whole Eve thing. As mentioned earlier, there's a good possibility that as teenagers, Inosuke reciprocated Kaoru's feelings, or at the very least found him attractive. However, once his home life grew more hostile and he started his quest to find a true Eve, this would have posed a problem. Like I talked about with Longit and Mia, Eve can't be a person Inosuke recognizes as an individual, and he'd already gotten close to both Kaoru and Kojiro. This takes both of them out of the running, but would also conflict with earlier sentiments he had towards Kaoru. To justify this, it would make sense for him to downplay Cherry's true abilities, effectively painting him as nothing more than a pretty face in his head.
You guys have probably seen him skate at his max a lot.
Nope, not one time. He's never felt the need to go out of his way to prove himself to anyone.
I think his choice for Kojiro's dog is interesting too. Kojiro is represented by a Great Dane, a breed known for their large size and muscular build, which, yeah, that really checks out. However, Great Danes are also known as gentle giants, which could not be a more accurate description of Kojiro. Even as teenagers, Kojiro was always naturally looking out for other people. In a flashback at the start of episode 8, we see Adam skateboarding with a stranger who was one of his earliest Eve attempts. When the unnamed boy skates over the side of a cliff, Joe's immediate reaction is to go to his side and make sure that he's okay. As an adult, Kojiro is shown to be extremely caring to those he considers friends. He frequently gives the boys advice, especially to Reki and Longer during their falling out.
Problem?
I think I saw Reki in the elevator.
Hey, wait! Go get him, kid.
He also allows them to just hang out in his restaurant after hours. Kaoru is the obvious example, frequently eating there and drinking wine when it's just the two of them, but we also see this with Mia prior to Reki's second beef with Adam. Another thing Great Danes are known for is their protective nature, and I think this not only speaks to how much Inosuke has observed him, but the context in which he's observed him. Adam would usually hang out with Kaoru and Kojiro together, which is why this being a trait that Inosuke has picked up on does not surprise me in the slightest. Kojiro is extremely protective over Kaoru. Sure, they bicker frequently and even get a little aggressive with each other sometimes, but when Kaoru's actually upset or in trouble, Joe wastes no time making sure he's okay.
Kaoru! Come on, get up.
You know, I really thought this would be more fun, but that little race against Cherry turned out to be a bomb.
Seriously? You son of a bitch.
We gotta jet to the hospital! Rip it up!
Whether you want to interpret Kojiro's feelings for Kaoru as romantic or platonic, I know which camp I'm personally in. You can't deny that he's someone that's extremely important to him. I think that's part of the reason he really didn't like Adam when they grew up, because as deeply as Inosuke hurt him when he left, he could see the impact it had on Kaoru. When you're that close to someone, especially if you're a protective person like Kojiro is, you want to do everything in your power to make sure they don't get hurt again.
But I do know that now, I don't want anything to do with the creep.
We've now reached the last person on my list, and I've saved Tadashi for last for a reason. The alias he gives himself when entering the wedding tournament against Inosuke's wishes is Snake. This is such a fitting name, as within the biblical metaphor that is Adam's life, Tadashi was the snake that tempted him with the forbidden fruit when he taught him how to skateboard.
It's Mr. Inosuke. Do you want to try? I can show you how.
However, this isn't the only role he fills. Going back to that Tumblr post by Bayani, they give a lot of evidence to support Tadashi being Inosuke's version of Lilith. Lilith was made from the same clay as Adam, making them equals. Because of this, she refused to lay beneath him, believing they should lay side by side or she should be on top of him. Essentially, she refused to submit to him. In some depictions, Lilith is the snake in the Garden of Eden, which just makes this dual role all the more fitting for him. Despite a perceived power imbalance due to Tadashi technically working for him, they're equals in a lot of ways. Tadashi is actually older than Inosuke, and due to the fact that he taught him how to skateboard, he essentially made Adam into the skater he is today. When he brings up this fact, Inosuke reacts quite aggressively, and attempts to regain power by reminding him that he's Adam's dog. Did I mention these two have a bit of a pet play thing going on? Every time I watch a scene of these two, I feel as if I'm interrupting something I shouldn't be.
I'll have it prepared, sir.
Good doggy.
Speaking of dogs, Tadashi is represented by a border collie. Border collies are extremely loyal dogs that require tasks for mental stimulation. They're extremely protective of their families and form strong bonds with their owners. This is a really accurate depiction of Tadashi and his relationship with Inosuke, especially after the events of the show. However, it's also filtered through Adam's rigid perspective of their dynamic and waters down a lot of the complexity present between them. Tadashi is loyal and obedient, however he's shown to have no problem disobeying him when he feels he needs to. Entering the wedding tournament, he made a bet with Inosuke that if he won, Inosuke was to quit skateboarding, as there was a genuine fear that his actions could lead to legal trouble and ruin his political career. He eventually backs out of the race when he realizes doing so would take away Adam's only outlet, but this is something he does on his own terms, not Inosuke's. He's also shown to have no problem speaking up and questioning him, even if he ultimately follows his orders. For example, he doesn't say much in his own defense when Inosuke literally tells him he'll be taking the fall for his political crimes, which is just such an extreme thing to bite your tongue on. I would be calling the police myself right then and there. His obedience is mostly out of guilt. When confronting Reki, he tries telling him that skateboarding is a sport for delinquents and will make his path in life harder. Tadashi was there and didn't speak up for Inosuke when Ichiro burned his board, and considering he's the one who got him involved with skateboarding in the first place, he feels he's responsible for ruining his life. In Josie Cafe's video, they talk about how a lot of this is a big metaphor for homosexuality. Literally using their interpretation, Ichiro burning his skateboard and forbidding him from skating again is synonymous with a family finding out their son is gay and forbidding him from having further relationships with men.
I've looked the other way for way too long. You can't keep pulling that kind of crap.
This also ties into Tadashi's feelings. We don't see him skateboarding in the present day until the tournament, and his guilt is reflective of someone with internalized homophobia blaming themselves for turning someone gay and ruining their life.
I wish I'd never taught him how to skate. I feel like if it was any other hobby, he could have befriended a child of proper social standing instead of me. Then the senior master wouldn't have made him quit.
This, along with their long history, prevents Tadashi from ever being a potential Eve, despite the fact that he is the person closest to Inosuke. Even with his unwavering loyalty and frequent obedience, he is not completely subservient. He has his own opinions, thoughts, and feelings, and making Tadashi his Eve would mean Adam would have to be constantly reminded of the fact that, in a lot of ways, Tadashi is superior to him. The qualifying round proved that Tadashi is faster than Inosuke on a board, and his skating style is very similar to Adam's because he came up with it in the first place. However, regardless of their complicated and honestly toxic dynamic, there does seem to be mutual feelings between them. Post-redemption, and I'm putting that in air quotes and setting it aside for later, Inosuke is shown to be gentler and kinder to Tadashi, showing the care he does hold for him.
But he reminded me everything I learned from you back when we were little kids.
Though in order for them to have a romantic relationship, Inosuke would need to set aside his Eve fantasy, which doesn't seem like something he's necessarily willing to do. Now, do I think Inosuke and Tadashi should be together? Honestly, I hope Inosuke ends up in prison for various things, but I suppose if he had to be with anyone, at least he's not a teenager. I know there's a common joke in the fandom that Tadashi needs to be saved, but here's the thing. That man knows exactly what he's getting himself into, and based on the final moments in the last episode, that man does not want to be saved. He's exactly where he wants to be.
Did you think I'd release you from your collar? Silly pup, you're mine for the rest of our lives.
Okay.
Also, Tadashi himself is not completely innocent. Sure, he's not out here grooming minors and putting people in the hospital, but he does regularly enable Inosuke's behavior.
I just wanted to tell you I'll be forfeiting the beef with Snow.
What?
He seems to be better suited for you and your needs. He deserves your love.
I also feel like a lot of people forget he hit a 17-year-old with his car and brought him to a love hotel instead of a hospital to try and buy his silence. So maybe it's a match made in hell. I don't know. Part 4. Redemption? So let's talk about the elephant in the room, and that's Inosuke's very brief redemption arc. Yeah, I don't buy it. Here's the thing. A redemption means the characters had significant change in their actions and worldview. Inosuke's view of the world does change, as Longo reminds him that skateboarding is meant to be fun in the first place. And he does show some minor improvements in his behavior. This change in behavior is mostly seen towards Tadashi though. As stated before, he's kinder and gentler with him, and the biggest show of his improvement is him being willing to take some of the heat himself for his own crimes, rather than leaving it all on Tadashi. However, this is where his changes truly end. In the OVA, he still takes a lot of time to creepily watch Longa, and even in the credits of the final episode, he jumps out of a plane with a heart-covered parachute to see Longa and give him roses. So it seems he's still actively pursuing him to some degree. Also in his personal life, he's still shown to be corrupt. Sure, he's willing to take some responsibility for his own actions, but he also uses favors to get Detective Kiriko, the woman investigating his involvement, transferred to Tokyo so she can no longer meddle in his life. He also sells out Takano to protect himself, getting any further investigations dropped permanently. Overall, he's still primarily acting in his own interests. He just has a bit more regard for Tadashi's feelings and treats him like, you know, an actual human being. I personally am interested to see what direction they take him in, and I'm curious if they're actually going to try to properly redeem him in Season 2. However, I don't think I'll ever fully be on board with him. He's kind of like a Baija Fowler in Blue Eye Samurai to me. I absolutely despise everything he's about, and he makes me want to climb out of my own skin, but he's well written, and the direction the show is heading requires him to interact with the main character in a somewhat amicable way. Who knows, maybe they'll uncreepify Inosuke.
Oh my, the main course has arrived. Hello, little longer. We meet again. What a sweet reward. I'm overjoyed.
Yeah, I don't think I can ever get fully over some of that stuff. I'm sorry. Hi, you made it to the end of the video. Look at you. You made it through however long this ended up being. I've been filming for 5 hours. This script ended up being 20 pages long. I am gonna enjoy editing this so much, you guys. Hi, this is post-editing AJ. Can confirm, had a ton of fun editing this video. On my phone, as it crashed my laptop 3 times, which was one part in a chain of technical issues that I had making this video. The gods tried to stop me. I said, fuck you, I'm doing it anyways. So I hope you enjoyed. If you watched to the end, it would mean a lot to me if you could like this video and subscribe to my channel. I'll be completely honest, I don't upload very frequently. The last video on this channel was a year and a half ago, and it's the only one I've ever put out. I plan on making more content here. I think the problem before was I unreasonably thought that I could upload frequently and on a consistent schedule. And if you have ADHD, you know setting expectations like that for yourself is a recipe for executive dysfunction to come and kick your ass. So no, I likely won't be uploading weekly or even monthly, but I can guarantee that when I do upload, it'll be a well thought out video that I put a lot of time and effort into. I make these videos with a lot of care because I'm genuinely passionate about the pieces of media I choose to analyze. Can you tell I was a speech kid in high school? And a drama kid in middle school? There's honestly a couple more things in Skate I wouldn't mind talking about. This show was meant to be silly in my head, and then I was slammed with emotional damage. So, you know, average viewing experience, honestly. Also, I'm just a massive Renga and Matcha Blossom shipper, like pretty much everyone else in the fandom, so that probably has something to do with it too. Season 2, I mean, hopefully coming out soon. Anyways, I'll link to other places that you can find me down below, and to any people who I need to credit for referencing in this video, you can find them down there too. As always, take care, and I will see you the next time I get massively hyperfixated on a piece of media. Peace! Finish this shit. 3 minutes to midnight, baby!